Thank you, and I would like to welcome the Minister to the House, and I very much welcome this debate. I think while we prepare to celebrate for the centenaries of 1916, we should also reflect on the fact that our new state also brought with it some very dark elements. The forced adoption of people within and without this state before and after the 1952 Act was passed is something that should bring a deep sense of shame to all of us as a society. We recently had cause in this House to discuss the Tuam babies and wider issues. The issue of forced adoption is very much tied up in that whole era, and the attitude of society to those who did not apparently live up to what were very cruel standards. In principle, I would personally fully support the senators in making the tracing of birth parents or adopted children easier, and one that affords rights to both parties in proportion. I welcome the fact that the Government is proposing that this bill is supported in the Seanad and referred to the Oireachtas Committee on Health and Children for further consideration. Work is already underway on the development of an adoption information and tracing general scheme and heads of bill, which will provide for statutory access to adoption records and birth information. The heads of bill will provide that access to records will be provided to people previously involved in adoptions insofar as is possible and in line with legal advice. While Dr Ryan has done an excellent job in the drafting of this bill and seeks to go no further than the decision of the Supreme Court in IOT versus B, it has to be accepted that there is a significant element of doubt as to the exact meaning of that Supreme Court decision. It's speculated on one side that, given the Supreme Court decided that the rights of neither the birth parent or child were absolute, the release of a birth certificate would not prejudice the constitutional right of the birth parent to privacy. The other interpretation of the Supreme Court decision, and the one the Adoption Board has since relied on, is that the release of a birth cert would prejudice the constitutional right of privacy of the birth parent. In the circumstances, I think it's appropriate that this legislation would not be objected to in this House by the Government, but rather referred to the committee so that all these details can be teased out. In my view, given the complexities and personal stories involved, I think that whatever way the bill is ultimately drafted, the matter may again appear before the Supreme Court for decision. I would like to make a constructive comment on the bill, which my senator colleagues and the Minister may reflect on. I think there could be little objection in relation to the matter of medical records being released. There is a far greater understanding today of the hereditary nature of illness, and it would seem unconscionable that someone who was themselves adopted would have, for example, during a pregnancy of their own, absolutely no information or even the right to it on their own parents' medical history, or no knowledge of what regressive gene they may be carrying or passing on. Of course, an adopted person would have no idea that they themselves might be afflicted by a hereditary illness until such time as they themselves become ill. I think, given the judgment IOT versus B, it would be very difficult to try to assert that an adopted person does not have the right to know their medical history. Surely this could be done without compromising any supposed right to privacy. Finally, I would just say that it would seem to me that there is a huge variety of situations which this legislation will have to cope with. No one adopted person or natural parent or their wants or needs will be the same. Whatever legislation comes out of this needs to be flexible and needs to respect all parties, something that we have failed to do in this country to date. If it takes time to get it right, I believe it is time well spent. And finally, I would like to commend the senators for putting forward this bill, and I look forward to a constructive debate as this goes through the houses of the Oireachtas.
Thank you, Senator.